was as simple as that. And I said, well, what do you want? What are your goals? They were not out to take over Colombo. And in that sense of describing them as a terrorist organisation, they were not out to blow up the Opera House or the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Indeed, I've said many times that if they had their eyes on the Opera House, it would not be to blow it up, but to sing in it. They were, therefore, seeking to preserve their homeland as they saw. They had as much historic justification for this land as the Sinhalese had for theirs. And I agree, the weapons that they have used, the means they have used, have been well beyond that of the General Convention of Geneva Accords of how you should run your army. And they have used terror. And I don't excuse that. And it's awful. And it doesn't make much difference. I'm a paediatrician. I don't like to see children destroyed by anyone's bombs. They have used terror. But if you're going to understand the terror, and you're going to use the appellation terrorist, then you have to see the context in which it is used. And that context is the context of the unremitting state terror, of which you've heard tonight. Now, it's not there by accident. This is a racist issue. This is a religious issue. This is a political issue. Someone's mentioned China. The JVP, the People's Revolutionary Party, is a strong party. Launched its own terrorist revolution in the 70s and in the 80s, and probably 60,000 people died. They mean business. It's a Maoist party and boast of their allegiance to Beijing. They, and you can look it up on the web just as much as I did not want the Tamils to succeed because Lenin said that you are not allowed to encourage autonomy before the revolution, because it mitigates against the concept of the proletariat dictatorship and so forth. This is a political, ideological thing. It is a religious, ideological thing. Some of the fundamentalist Buddhists, I'm not sure whether it's the Mahavamsa or the Mahabharata. I'm not a scholar at this, but I read some of the stuff. What are they saying? Is that we had a wonderful primitive communal society here based on the tank and the paddy and the priest, and this got ruined by foreign devils invading from the north. And it is our duty to the Lord Buddha to eradicate this threat. This is a religious concept and it's a racial concept. These are some of the things I learned. What did I observe? Well, in terms of experimenting, and if you forget everything else I say, I would like you to remember this. I divided the students up into 5 groups. They'd never really done research before, and one of the groups we weighed and measured children in the schools, and indeed we measured the length of their kidneys. And we worked out then what percentage of them were stunted and wasted. About 60% of the children, this was in the good year of 2005, were, when you compare them to international means, were stunted and wasted. That was when they had food to eat. I worry what's happening in the camps now. Of those 60% who were stunted and wasted, according to MSF type procedures, about 10 or 15% were acutely malnourished and needing therapeutic amounts of food, which includes protein and includes iron. So what's the point of all this? The point of all this is that this may be a long shot, but it is known that if you starve children, they will die more frequently. You only die once, but I mean, more people are dying. There's a greater incidence of death succumbing to infections. But more than that, because you need these nutritions for the developing brain. If you starve a child for a significant amount of period, probably especially with iron, their cognitive ability, their executive function is reduced, and their ability then to create an independent civilization is reduced. Is this a subjugation by starvation of the children? Well, probably not, probably just inefficiency, but the thought is there. And I'll close on this one other thing, which has really surprised me. After measuring those children, and I went back, we measured children in the Tamil tea estates. And we had a bunch of data, and it took me a while to get. I only just analysed this data about 5-6 months ago. The heights and the weights and the obvious vitamin deficiencies and iron deficiencies in the Tamil tea estates was actually higher than that in Kilinochchi, which was head and shoulders over that in Colombo. I was asked to write a paper to compare this, so I looked at the data coming out of the other world's hotspots. Darfur, UNICEF data from Afghanistan, data available from Iraq, data from Gaza, we've talked about, supposedly, economic slavery and deprivation of that other group of Tamil people, the ones who are working themselves to an early death in the tea plantations.
Thanks very much indeed, Dr. Whitehall, and we do have some copies of his book, actually, which will be available to buy from our table, which Sam is going to bring up in just a moment, at $20, all of which can be given to the Sri Lanka Human Rights Project. I think, in closing, what I would say, as the director of the Centre for Peace and Conflict Studies, is that Dr. Whitehall has further emphasised something very important, which has been inscribed in the contributions of all our speakers this evening in their different ways, namely that it is our duty to refuse to accept violence in all its forms. But it is also our duty to understand why some people indulge in violence. And that distinction between understanding and excusing, or understanding and justifying, which I take to be part of the very important message that Dr. Whitehall was bringing to us, is a distinction which we have to reopen, because it has been collapsed and shrunken by advocates of the so-called war on terrorism. If there is one key ideological ploy of the war on terrorism, it is to smear people who want to explain the incidents of organised violence, in particular by non-state armed groups, as being the equivalent of excusing and justifying it. The two must be kept separate. The history that we heard from Sam is a reminder, I think, of something equally important, which is that people's needs and people's human rights do not just go away. If attempts are made to quell them by force of arms or administrative fiat, they will crop up somewhere else in another form. And we have an equal responsibility, it seems to me, to see and think what part each of us we can play in providing at least the hope that the aspirations of the Tamil people of Sri Lanka to justice and human rights can be pursued by effective non-violent means, and that will be the best investment any of us can make in any future prospect of peace. So with that, may I ask that you show your appreciation for our speakers. Don't forget to take the opportunity, if you can, to contribute to our gold coin collection. And thank you all very much for coming. And hope to see you.